Seventh meditation, in which the attempt is made to form an idea of the character of experience in supersensible worlds. The experiences that showed themselves to be necessary for the soul, if it wants to penetrate into supersensible worlds, may seem deterrent to many people. These may say they do not know what would befall them if they ventured upon such processes, or how they would be able to stand them. Under the influence of such a feeling, the opinion is very easily formed that it is better not to interfere artificially with the development of the soul, but calmly to surrender to the guidance of which the soul remains unconscious, and to await its effect in the future upon one's inner life. Such a thought must, however, always be repressed by a person who is able to make another thought a living power within him. Namely, that it is natural to human nature to progress, and that if no attention were paid to these things, it would mean disloyally consigning to stagnation forces in the soul which are waiting to be unfolded. Forces of self-unfolding are present in every human soul, and there cannot be a single one that would not listen to the call for unfolding them, if in some way or other it could learn something about these powers and their importance. Moreover, nobody will allow himself to be deterred from the ascent into higher worlds, unless beforehand he has taken up a false position towards the processes through which he has to go. These processes are described in the preceding meditations, and if they are to be expressed by words which must naturally be taken from ordinary human existence, they can be rightly expressed only in that way. For experiences on the supersensible path of knowledge are related to the human soul in such a way that they are exactly similar to what, for example, a highly strong feeling of loneliness, a feeling of hovering over an abyss, and the like, may mean to the soul of man. Through the experience of such feelings and sensations, the powers to tread the path of knowledge are produced. They are the germs of the fruits of supersensible knowledge. All these experiences in a certain way carry something in themselves which lies hidden deep within them. When they are experienced, this hidden element is brought to a state of the utmost tension. Something bursts the feeling of loneliness which surrounds this hidden something like a veil, and it then pushes forward into the soul's life as a means of knowledge. One must, however, take into consideration that when the right path is entered upon, something else at once presents itself behind every such experience. When the one has occurred, the other cannot fail to appear. When anything has to be born, there is at once added the power to bear it steadfastly, if we will only reflect calmly on this power, and also take time to notice that which wants to manifest itself in the soul. When something painful appears, and when at the same time there is a sure feeling in the soul that forces are to be found which will make the pain bearable, and with which we are able to connect ourselves, we are then able to take up such a position towards experiences which would be unbearable in the course of our ordinary life, so that we seem to be the spectator of ourselves in all such experiences. And thus people who, whilst on their way towards supersensible knowledge, pass through many a rise and fall of great waves of feeling, show nevertheless perfect equanimity in ordinary life. It is of course quite possible that experiences that are made within also react upon the state of mind in outer life in the physical world. so that for a time we do not come into harmony with ourselves and with life in the way which was possible before we entered upon the path of knowledge. We are then obliged to draw from that which has already been obtained within ourselves such forces as make it possible again to find the balance. And if the path of knowledge be rightly trod, no situation can arise in which this would not be possible. The best path of knowledge will always be the one that leads to the supersensible world, through strengthening or condensing the life of the soul by means of concentration on inner meditations, during which certain thoughts or feelings are retained in the mind. In this case, it is not a question of experiencing a thought or an emotion as we do in order to find our way in the physical world, but the point is to live entirely with and within the thought or emotion, concentrating all the power of our soul in it so that it entirely fills the consciousness during the time of retirement within ourselves. We think, for instance, of a thought which has given to the soul a conviction of some kind. We at first leave on one side any power of conviction it may have, and only live with it and in it again and again, so as to become one with it. It is not necessary that it should be a thought of things belonging to the higher worlds, although such a thought is more effective. For inner meditation, we can even use a thought which pictures an ordinary experience. Fruitful, for instance, are emotions which represent resolutions with regard to deeds of love, and which we kindle within ourselves to the highest degree of human warmth and sincere experience. Effective, especially where knowledge is concerned, are symbolic representations gained from life, or accepted on the advice of such persons as are in a certain way experts in these matters, because they know the fruitfulness of the means employed from what they themselves have gained by them. Through these meditations, that must become a habit, nay, a necessity of life, just as breathing is necessary for the life of the body. We shall concentrate the powers of the soul, and by concentrating, strengthen them. Only we must succeed during the time of inner meditation in remaining in such a state that neither outer impressions of the senses nor any recollections of such play upon the soul. Recollections also of all that we have experienced in ordinary life, all that gives pleasure or pain to the soul, must remain silent, so that the soul may surrender itself exclusively to that which we ourselves determine shall occupy it. The capacities for supersensible knowledge grow legitimately only out of that which we have acquired in this way by inner meditations, the content and the form of which have been fixed by the power of our own soul. The important point is not the source whence we derive the object of the meditation. We may take it from an expert in these matters, or from the literature of spiritual science. The important point is to make its substance an inner experience of our own life, and not merely to choose it out from thoughts which may arise in our own soul, or from things which we feel inclined to consider as the best objects for meditation. Such an object has but little power, because the soul is already familiar with it, and cannot consequently make the necessary effort in order to become one with it. It is in making this effort, however, that the effective means of acquiring the faculties for supersensible knowledge are to be found, and not in the mere fact of becoming one with the substance of the meditation as such. We can also arrive at supersensible sight in other ways. People may arrive at fervent meditation and inner experience by reason of their whole constitution, and so they may be able to liberate powers for acquiring supersensible knowledge in their soul. Such powers may all of a sudden manifest themselves in souls which do not seem at all predetermined for such experiences. In the most varied ways, the supersensible life of the soul may awaken. But we can only arrive at an experience of which we are the masters, as we are the masters of ourselves in ordinary life, if we tread the path of knowledge here described. Any other eruption of the supersensible world into the experiences of the soul will mean that such experiences enter in, as it were, forcibly, and the person in question will either lose himself in them or lay himself open to every conceivable kind of deception with regard to their value, their true meaning, and their importance within the real supersensible world. It is most important to keep in mind that on the path to supersensible knowledge, the soul changes. It may be the case that in ordinary life in the physical world, we are not at all inclined to fall into any kind of illusion or deception, but that on entering the supersensible world, we fall victims to such deceptions and illusions in the most credulous manner. It may also happen that in the physical world we have a very good and sound feeling for truth, and understand that we must not think only in such a way of a thing or an occurrence as to satisfy our own egoism in order to judge it rightly. Yet in spite of this, we may arrive at seeing in the supersensible world only what pleases our egoism. We must remember how this egoism colors all that we behold. We are observing only that to which our egoism is directing its gaze in accordance with its own inclinations, though perhaps we may not realize that it is egoism which is directing our spiritual sight. And it is then quite natural that we should take what we see for truth. Protection against this can only be obtained if, on the path to supersensible knowledge through earnest self-observation and through an energetic striving for clearer self-knowledge, we more and more develop our capacity to discern truly how much egoism is to be found in our own soul and where it is finding utterance. Only then we shall be able to emancipate ourselves by degrees from the leadership of this egoism, if in our meditation we forcibly and relentlessly put before ourselves the possibility of our soul being in this or that respect under its domination. It belongs to the unhampered mobility of the soul in higher worlds that it should make clear to itself in what a different manner certain qualities of the soul react upon the spiritual world from that in which they do in the physical world. This becomes especially evident when we direct our attention to the moral qualities of the soul. Within the physical world, we distinguish between the laws of nature and those of morality. When we want to explain natural processes, we cannot make use of moral ideas. We explain a poisonous plant according to natural law, and we do not condemn it morally for being poisonous. We clearly understand that, with regard to the animal kingdom, there can at most be only a question of something resembling morality, and that a moral judgment in the strict sense could only disturb the main issue. It is in circumstances of human life that moral judgment about the worth of existence begins to be of importance. Man himself makes his own value dependent on this judgment, when he comes so far that he is able to judge himself impartially. Nobody, however, would dream of considering the laws of nature as identical with, or even similar to, moral laws, if he considers physical existence in the right way. As soon as we enter the higher worlds, this is changed. The more spiritual the worlds which we enter, the more the moral law and what may be termed natural law in these worlds coincide. In the physical world, we know that we are speaking figuratively when we say an evil deed that it burns in the soul. We know that natural fire is quite a different thing. But such a distinction does not exist in the supersensible worlds. For there hate and envy are forces acting in such a way that we may term their effects the natural laws of that world. Hate and envy have there the effect that the being who is hated or envied reacts upon the hater or envier in a consuming, extinguishing manner, so that processes of destruction are established which are hurtful to the spiritual being. Love acts in such a way in spiritual worlds that its effect is an irradiation of warmth that is productive and helpful. This can already be observed in the elemental body of man. Within the sense world, the hand that commits an immoral action must in its activity be explained according to natural law, quite in the same way as a hand that serves morality. But certain elemental parts of man remain undeveloped when no corresponding moral feelings exist. And we must account for the imperfect formation of elemental organs through imperfect moral qualities, in the same way as natural processes are explained by natural law. On the other hand, we must never from the imperfect development of a physical organ draw the conclusion that the corresponding part of the elemental body must be imperfectly developed. We must always keep in mind that in the different worlds, different kinds of law prevail. A person may have a physical organ imperfectly developed, but at the same time, the corresponding elemental organ may be not only normally perfect, but more perfect to the same extent as the physical one is imperfect. In a significant way, does the difference between the supersensible and the physical worlds present itself in all that is connected with ideas of beauty and ugliness. The way in which these ideas are employed in physical existence loses all significance as soon as we enter supersensible worlds. Beautiful, for instance, only that being can be called beautiful which succeeds in communicating all its inner experiences to the other beings of its world, so that they can take part in the totality of its experience. The capacity of manifesting all that lives within oneself, and of not having to hide away anything, might in higher worlds be called beautiful. And in these worlds, this conception of beauty completely coincides with that of unreserved sincerity, of honest manifestation of that which a being carries within itself. Similarly, that being might be called ugly, which does not want to show outwardly its own inner content, and which holds back its own experience, and hides itself from other beings with regard to certain qualities. Such a being withdraws from its spiritual surroundings. This conception of ugliness coincides with that of insincere manifestation of oneself. To lie and to be ugly are realities which in the spiritual world are identical, so that the being which appears ugly is a deceitful being. What are known in the physical world as desires and wishes also appear with quite a different significance in the spiritual world. Desires which in the physical world arise from the inner nature of the human soul do not exist in the spiritual world. What may be termed desires in that world are kindled by that which is seen outside the being in question. A being which must feel that it has not a certain quality, which, according to that being's nature, it should have, beholds another being endowed with that quality. Moreover, it cannot help having this other being always before it. As in the physical world, the eye naturally sees what is visible, so in the supersensible world, the want of a quality always carries a being into the neighborhood of another being endowed with the quality in question. And the sight of this other being becomes a continual reproach that acts as a real force, making the being who is hampered with the fault desirous of amending it. This is a quite different experience from a desire in the physical world, for in the physical world, free will is not interfered with through such circumstances. A being may oppose itself to that which the sight of something else will call forth within it. It will then succeed by degrees in being taken away from its model. The consequence, however, will be that the being who opposes itself to its model will bring itself into worlds where the conditions of existence will be worse than those would have been which were given to it in the world for which it was in a certain way predestined. All this shows the soul that its world of conceptions must be transformed when entering supersensible realms. Ideas must be changed, widened, and blended with others if we want to describe the supersensible world correctly. That is the reason why descriptions of supersensible worlds, given in terms of the physical world, without any alteration or transformation, are always unsatisfactory. We may realize that it is the outcome of a correct human feeling when we use, within the physical world, more or less symbolically, or even as immediately applicable, ideas which only become fully significant with regard to supersensible worlds. Thus we may really feel lying to be ugly, but compared with the character of this idea in the supersensible world, such a use of words in the physical world is only a reflection, resulting from the fact that all the different worlds are related to one another, and these relations are dimly felt and unconsciously perceived in the physical world. Yet we must remember that in the physical world, a lie, which we feel as ugly, is not necessarily ugly in its outer appearance, and that it would be a confusion of ideas if we were to explain ugliness in physical nature as the outcome of lying. In the supersensible world, however, anything false, seen in its right light, impresses itself upon us as being ugly in appearance. Here again, possible deceptions have to be taken into consideration and guarded against. The soul may meet a being in the supersensible world, which may rightly be characterized as evil, although it manifests itself in a form that must be called beautiful, if judged according to the idea of the beautiful that we bring with us from the physical world. In such a case, we shall not be able to judge correctly before we have penetrated to the heart of the being in question. We shall then discover that the beautiful manifestation was only a mask which does not harmonize with the nature of the being. And then, that which we thought to be beautiful, according to ideas borrowed from the physical world, impresses itself with particular force upon our mind as ugly. And as soon as this happens, the evil being will no more be able to deceive us with its beauty. It must unveil itself to such a beholder in its true form, which can only be an imperfect expression of that which it is within. Such phenomena of the supersensible world make it especially evident how human conceptions must be transformed when we enter that world.